This program is brought to you by Emory University.
I'm going to try and honor the agenda and the times that are on the agenda just to make sure we're able to get to everybody today. So again, forgive me for interrupting your conversations. But I'm going to do the respect to the panel to give a quick introduction. Again, biographical information on all the presenters is in the materials that have been provided. And a quick reminder that at that link that's actually on the front page of the agenda, if you haven't already identified it, if you go to that link is where you'll find all the materials that the presenters have provided to correspond with their comments and presentations today. So that is a resource for you, and we want to direct you to that and remind you that it's available. With us this afternoon for our next panel, we're going to discuss what services victims need and what resources are available. There's a whole host of people with great depth of expertise and range of perspective on that topic. It's going to be moderated by Judge Kirk, who is the Chief Judge of the Magistrate Court here in Fulton County, Jamila Furch, who is the Independent Living Program Coordinator with Wellspring Living, Heather Stockdale, the Executive Director and Co-Founder of Georgia Cares, Melba Robinson, the Program Director of Haven ATL, the Salvation Army, and Jeff Shaw, who's the Director of the Out of Darkness Program. So I will turn it over to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We know that victims and support services include a collection of services. They're provided by an array of government as well as non-governmental organizations. We have individuals, agencies and systems, direct care service providers that specifically target sex trafficking victims, and then we have those programs and providers that target regardless of the classification. For instance, homeless youth and runaway youth. We know that there are programs that also are unable to target youth because of the scope of the services that they actually offer. The needs of active victims and survivors can be overwhelming. Questions from the bench are often unanswered. Where do we start? And what do we do once we get started? This panel of experts is here to walk us through the services and what it is and what's available for us. I'm going to begin by having each panelist introduce themselves, give us a summary of their agency's focus, and identify whether you work primarily with adults or children. Ms. Furch.
Hello, my name is Jamila Furch. I am the program coordinator for Wellsprings Living Independent Living Program. As a whole, our program serves girls starting at the age of 12 up until women at the age of 30. We have several different components to our program. We have a community-based, which is our Empowered Living Academy, where individuals in our residential program and out in the community can come and get career knowledge, they can get educational, get their GED, and we've also partnered with other agencies to get them full-time jobs so they can really kind of start maintaining and living life with livable wage. So that's kind of our community outsource. We have 3 different residential programs. Our first residential program is for girls ages 12 to 17, which is a holistic approach to healing. In that program, they basically do everything there as far as schooling. We do some online schooling. We have a special education teacher as well. They do therapy there, life skills, just a kind of an array of activities housed in that program, and that's for the girls. We also have a Renewed Hope House, which is our assessment center that ranges from ages of 18 to 30. From there, the ladies typically stay there for about 90 days of just like stabilization, getting back on medications, getting into like a safe environment, really starting setting goals just for kind of their life. In that program, we provide all of their needs. They also have therapy there. We're a faith-based organization, so they have the opportunity of exploring their spirituality as well in that program. Once they are in there for about 90 days, then they can transition into our independent living program, and that's the program that I coordinate. Again, ages 18 to 30. We serve ladies who have been sexually exploited or just vulnerable for sexual exploitation. And we say vulnerable, that goes to just homelessness, substance abuse, a past trauma history from childhood on. And in our independent living program, it's also holistic. So we provide therapy, we provide a spiritual component to the program. Life skills is also something that we provide to the ladies. And then from there, our ladies, once they've been in our program for a good 3 months, they're able to transition and start going into our Empowered Living Academy, getting their GED, if that's what they're kind of seeking for. If they already have their GED, they're able to go on our career track, where they'll start learning different career tools. So Dress to Success, resume writing skills. There's also a component from Microsoft where they can learn PowerPoint, Excel. And then from there, they're able to get an apprenticeship. For another 3 months, they'll be working in the apprenticeship, and then the possibilities of being hired full-term or being hired on. There's 2 ladies now in our program who actually have full-time jobs through this apprenticeship and taking all of these courses. Once they get into that phase, then they can stay in our program for probably another 3 or 4 months to start saving, to start looking for apartment living, continuing with their therapy, of course, and just continuing with just healthy living through their life skills. And then they transition out into the community, and then we check on, they also have a mentor process, so the mentor stays with them throughout like 12 months, so they continue on that relationship with their mentor as well. That's a little bit of Wellsprings.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw.
Good afternoon, y'all. So I'm going to share a story because I relate to stories. This was kind of my foray into this issue. Prior to Out of Darkness, I was actually a civil litigator, and most of my work was in Fulton County. And someone had heard that I was getting interested in the issue of human trafficking and had a referral of a criminal defense case, which I had never done any of that before. But it was a young woman who had been arrested in Gwinnett County at a pretty nice hotel, and she was charged with felony forgery because they had counterfeit bills in the car, and then keeping up a place of prostitution for the hotel that was in her name, and then there was marijuana in the vehicle, so she was also charged with possession of marijuana. And when she was arrested, completely uncooperative initially, and she was arrested with a couple other women, and then during the course of her being in the judicial system and talking to her mom, because she was one of the fortunate few that still had a mom that was very much engaged and interested in her life, they reached out and said, well, she was working for, to them it was just a pimp, but we would know him as a trafficker based on the methods that he employed. And she had been arrested prior with him along with a couple other girls, but they talked and they cooperated. And so when they all had gotten out of the system and they were back together, the girls that talked, he beat until he broke his arm and had to go to the hospital. It was so severe. So this time she knew exactly what was expected of her. Don't talk to anybody, don't cooperate. And so when she shared that, our whole approach to the case changed in helping, this was 5 years ago, have the type of thing that you guys are here to do today and talk to the assistant prosecutor and talk to the judge and help them understand the system that she had operated in and why she was being so difficult in the case of the prosecution. And through that, we were able to negotiate that as long as she had a year of clean drug testing, then there would be a conditional discharge of the marijuana, and then the other charges would be dismissed against her. So she did that because once she was getting help and she was removed from him and the court was providing a place where she could process through this, and she worked with the FBI, she was able to complete that, and now she's got a job, a real job, and a family. She's got her first child, and her life is turned, and that was all through the interaction she had through the court. So I'm excited about what you guys are doing here. I didn't tell you anything about our program, so I apologize. So what do? We serve primarily women, but we also serve men who have been sexually exploited. The youngest we've served is 17 if they come to us through the state and they're aging out of the foster care system and it's not beneficial to initiate them into that, and then 3 months later have them leave. And the oldest woman we've served was 60 years old. So anyone in that range we will serve. And our goal is to provide immediate, if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, meet those very base needs first of shelter, safety, food, clothing. A lot of the women, when they reach out to us, they just come with the clothes on their back because they're getting out of a situation of crisis or emergency. And we have 24-hour intake, so we operate a hotline. And when the hotline is called, if the individual is ready for immediate help, we will actually send a team to go and pick her or him up and then bring them to safety. And our homes do 24-hour intake and staffing as well. It's not a situation where when we get a call, then we send the staff to the house. We have not had an empty bed in the home for probably 4 years now, so that house is 24-hour staffed. We've had over 900 women come through since 2012. And we want to be a resource to our law enforcement officials when they get a call or they're running an operation. And I think I saw the DeKalb crew here. Are they all here? Maybe they stepped out. I'm going to have to shame her later. Okay. But we work on the DeKalb date task force. And so we just make ourselves available that if they encounter an adult through one of their operations that is willing to receive help and cooperate, then we'll come to the station, pick her up, and bring her into our program. We only fill the crisis time frame, so it's typically about 3 to 4 weeks. That can include detox, medical stabilization, meeting those very immediate needs, and then as the stabilization occurs, then we'll help them transition through case management into longer term, typically 12 to 18 month situations that are residential. So these are people who typically don't have any form of income, don't have any access to housing, criminal records, couldn't get a job right away. So we come around them with counseling, case management, job skills, life skills. Wellspring is actually a partner where we refer after that 3 to 4 week of stabilization. Then if Wellspring's the right fit, we'll set up the interview. But the great thing is she's doing the interview and the application from a place of safety, not from a crack house or a hotel room. It's from a place where she's being assisted through that process. And then our partnerships, I don't want to steal their thunder of what they do, but we all have a niche. And so our niche is the adults that are domestic. We don't do foreign-born unless they have English as a functional language. We're not situated to do that. We don't work on visas and those things. So it's adult, domestic, and then we particularly meet the need for women who need that long-term residential. They're not high-functioning yet, as opposed to what Melba does. So with that, Melba.
I am Melba Robinson. Ooh, this is loud. I'm the program director of Haven, Atlanta, and it's a program under the Salvation Army. And just like Jeff said, our program looks a little differently because we run a drop-in center. So I know you're probably wondering what a drop-in center looks like. So we work with the ladies that are coming out of trafficking or exploitation in the community. So a woman may not be ready to go to a residential. They may have a family that they want to live with or stay with. So we work with them right in the community. We provide a structured program, and it's a cohesive program 2 days out of the week. And they come to Haven, Atlanta, and they receive all of the necessary skills that they may need to live a sustainable life. So same thing, we provide case management, individual and group therapy. We have a support group, we have Bible study, we have health and wellness, we have adult literacy, we have GED classes. So they come there, it's like a one-stop shop. Whatever they're looking for is right there. And I just wanted to say, we cannot do this work alone. It takes all of us sitting here and knowing each other and knowing what organizations have what, so we're able to service all of the women. We service 18 and above. Just like Jeff said, his oldest was 60, our oldest was 65. So we take them as they are and we accept them the way they are, and we provide whatever they need, taking care of their basic needs. We also have phases in the program. We would hope for an individual to work through the program within a year, but we do not force them. Some women have more critical things, so we work with them along the way. And each phase, we acknowledge and we help them to achieve their goals. And once they achieve their goals, we graduate them from the program, and then they come into our alumni phase. And what our alumni phase look like is those women will come back and reach out and help other women that are trying to come out of this and help them along the way. So as we say, once a Haven lady, she's always going to be a Haven lady and assist others. We try to develop all of their skills because, as you know, they have been traumatized, but they have other skills. Their mothers, their wives, their aunts, their sisters, and we try not to focus so much on the trauma, but to still enhance their skills that they had before their trauma. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Heather and give you time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Stockdale, the director of Georgia Cares. I love going last because I get to feed off of what y'all said. So like Jeff and Melba said, we all work together in partnership and we each kind of have our niche. So for Georgia Cares, we serve, we're the statewide victim service agency for children who are victims of sexual exploitation and trafficking in Georgia. So what that means is we work with local jurisdictions and partners all over the state to serve kids who are suspected, because we're able to go out and do assessments to confirm their status as a victim or not. And when they're not a victim, we work to connect them to services for prevention and to ensure that those kids don't become future victims that we serve. And so just to give you a snapshot of what this looks like for Georgia, last year we were able to serve 469 youth. So we know that this issue in all of its forms is underreported, but for children we know that it's very similar to child sexual abuse where it's being underreported. So really I think for all of us we would say we serve a snapshot of the victims who are out there. But one of the additional services that we provide, similar to Out of Darkness, we have a 24-hour hotline where we accept referrals. So anyone who's working with children in whatever capacity, they might be a school counselor, a law enforcement officer, a judge, or a juvenile court employee. Anyone who has a suspicion can call us at any time, and then we'll coordinate an in-person assessment wherever that youth is. So we have one administrative office, but we serve kids all throughout the state. And how we do that is, like Melba said, we're meeting them where they are, but for us that means physically meeting them where they are. So we go out to a kid, whether a kid's in RYDC, in jail, at home with their parents, in a group home, wherever that kid might be, we go out to them to deliver services, and then we try to connect additional services wherever they are in that community. So like Melba said, we're not just focused on the trauma. While the trauma that they've endured through being trafficked and exploited is horrific, we really want to look at those root causes that led them to be vulnerable, and we want to make sure that we are filling those needs too. So we really focus on holistic health and care for the child, so that means educational needs are just as important as the clinical and therapeutic needs of getting them therapy to help heal from the trauma. So that's one of our goals. We look at the dimensions of child well-being, and we make sure that we have goals and services to address each one of those dimensions so that we have whole, healthy children who are also safe from trafficking. And we stay with the kids for as long as their journey is, with an asterisk around, up until age 18, where we refer to our fabulous partners here. So as far as the average age right now with the new kids that we served this past year is 14. That's just the average age, keep in mind, of the kids that we are serving. And then the youngest confirmed victim that we've had as of this past year is 8. Although we've received referrals for kids as young as 6 and 7 years old. So like I said, we stay with them for as long as their journey is. It's very specific for each child. We focus on individualized care. So while all of the kids that we're serving may have been traumatized by being trafficked and exploited, that looks different for every child. Every person processes trauma differently, and even two girls who had the same trafficker could have had very different experiences with that trafficker. So we focus on individualized care to meet that child's needs. So I think that's a quick overview, and I'm excited to get into some of the questions.
And so our first question is, and I'm going to begin first with Ms. Stockdale, how is it that you all interface with the courts? Because there are judges here, there are prosecutors here. Talk with us about how it is you all can interface with the courts.
So we oftentimes get referrals from the court. So we kind of track our typical referral sources. Number one is DFACS, the Department of Family and Children's Services, who we work closely with. And the next is the courts with DJJ and independent courts, of course, too. So we receive referrals for kids coming through the court system. I will say, by and large, I think the courts have done a great job being educated and being a great, first source of kids that are already in the system, being able to spot those warning signs and red flags of trafficking. And then we receive referrals, and then, like I said, we'll send someone out to do an assessment. So we work with them on the front end, but then we'll also oftentimes work with them kind of as a diversion, right? So we want to divert them from becoming further involved in the system, because we as a state, have really band together to say these kids are victims, and because they are victims, they deserve services, and we want to divert them from the juvenile justice system as much as possible. And so then we'll also work with the courts in establishing care plans. I talked about holistic care, and after our assessments, we're really able to zone in on what those needs are and what the strengths of each child are. So then we'll share kind of our individualized care plan, and a lot of times that can be included kind of with mandates and orders from the judges or courts to ensure that kids aren't serving additional time if they don't need to, and things like that.
All right. Ms. Robinson.
In regards to adults, same thing with a diversion program. We would get referrals from judges that would like for the women to participate in a program, and in turn, if they participate in a program, they can get their records expunged. So it's like if they go and participate and we make a recommendation that they're doing well in the program, they come to us with their goals, what they need to achieve in the program, and we report back, then they'll work towards expungement. So that's how we work with the courts.
So for us, initially, we're in 6 jails currently. We'll go visit women one-on-one in Atlanta City Detention Center, Cobb County, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Cherokee, and Bartow. And for us, originally, judges would put in their orders that in lieu of, women could come to us, and we've had a few successes from that, but overwhelmingly, the word just kind of got out. If you say this and do this and give this to your attorney, then you can get out of jail. And so we got swamped with clients who weren't interested really in all. Within a day, they would run. And so we've backed away from that, and what we've asked the judges who reach out to us to do is to actually kind of put the ball in the court of the ladies to send us a letter and initiate the process of us coming to visit, because if we can form a relationship with them, talk about the program in the jail without the lawyer there, just do it from a relational standpoint as opposed to possibly like a good-willed defender saying, hey, look, I found this program from you, all you gotta do is sign this, agree to this, the judge is on board, you can go to the program, and then they come and they're like, oh wait, I have to do what? They never actually read anything they signed. So right now we're in a place of doing it more relational, but we're in the process of crafting something that would be more useful to the courts and judges directly. So that's in development right now. And we've talked to a few judges, Judge Harris in Cobb County. There are a few who've said, hey, I'd love to, because we need the feedback of the courts. I don't know, judges, what you need. I don't know, prosecutors, what you need and how the process works. So we need your feedback. So I would encourage you, if this is something, I know you're so busy, but if this is something that you want to speak into and help craft for your county, then please, I don't know what door I'm opening here, but please reach out, because we'd really value having your feedback in how we begin to craft what these services will look like in partnership with the court.
And pretty much my answer is collective to everybody else's. For our assessment center, we work with a diversion court where young ladies come into our program based upon keeping them out of the life or just further victimizing them. They are mandated to come to the program. Kind of what Jeff said is that we do the same thing too as far as making it more independent and fostering their independence and their willingness versus meeting with their probation officers once a month. But these are the things that have to happen before your next meeting, just to ensure that they're invested in the program and not just utilizing the program as kind of like a get out of jail free card, but really utilizing the benefit of it all to do that healing.
And let me follow up with you. Who exactly makes the referral to your program? You mentioned the probation officer. Could the parent make the referral? Who can make the referral?
Yeah, as far as referrals, we get referrals from all kind of aspects. Wellspring has partnered with people in California and Florida and Minnesota, so we get out-of-state referrals. Jeff, we get a lot of referrals from Outer Darkness. We get referrals really from a lot of different areas.
And so let me ask, do we agree that trauma-informed care is the best care, best practices for these victims? Is there someone here that would say there's something better than trauma-informed care?
No, that's what we all believe.
Okay, and so if we say that is what is the best practices, how is it that we are able to evaluate those providers, other than you all obviously, that are saying, I can provide trauma-informed care? Anybody can put up a shingle. Anyone can say, this is the services I can provide. Is there a way to assess those services?
Can I jump in? I think that that's a really great question, and I think that because we're still really in the very early stages of this field as an emerging field, trafficking has always been around, but I think establishing, good and promising practices, we're still on the cusp of that. So, but evaluation is very important. We need to make sure that what we're doing has value and is of quality and is meeting the needs of, for us, youth, but for all victims. So one of the things that we're doing in the realm of child sex exploitation and trafficking is we've created standards, and we're starting off with these standards to be specifically for residential providers, because again, there are 2 homes primarily right now that we work with, but a lot of times we get very passionate, well-meaning people that have heard about this issue, which I absolutely appreciate the heart of, folks that are driven and want to help youth. However, that's not the only criteria for being able to provide quality services and safe services for kids in a residential setting. So we kind of did it with that in mind, that we want to make sure that what we're currently providing is of quality, with the lessons that we've learned over the last, 7+ years. But also, we do want to create a framework for those who are interested in pursuing safe, healthy, quality programming for youth in its many forms. So we wanted to create something that someone who's new to the field doesn't quite need to know what has been done, but is building the capacity to get there so that we can open it up and provide even more services for youth in the future. That's a great question.
And so that's for youth, as to adults, either.
Yeah, and I would add to is anybody saying, what does trauma-informed mean? Or have y'all talked about that already today? No?
They're nodding.
So that's probably a good starter point, and y'all probably have something to add. But for us, one is not taking a one-size-fits-all mentality. So if someone says, we do addiction, we do domestic violence, we do teen pregnancy, we do trafficking, then can I be blunt? They're probably not doing trafficking well, because I think from our experience, to do trafficking well, you have to be focused on trafficking. And it's something that often has like dual diagnosis, that there's also an attached addiction. And I think understanding with trafficking victims that addiction usually isn't the main issue. It's usually symptomatic of, I'm medicating the trauma that I've experienced, and understanding the research out there of how trauma impacts brain development. So the ability to sort and categorize information and recall memories and all the stuff that we would look at and say, oh, they're lying or they're mentally ill, that are actually, oh, this person maybe has been traumatized. So understanding what trauma is and how is that being injected into the programming that you're providing. So for us, I am not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a traumatologist, but we have people who are, and they shape the programs that we offer. And understanding that behaviors are responses to prior trauma. So when she talks this way or treats you that way or has this response or this trigger, that how can we address the underlying trauma, not behavior modification? I know I'm talking about a lot of different
So my specific question is, what is the evaluative tool? Like, how do we say that this is effective treatment, that this has been measured, 6 out of 10 victims are now survivors? How do we make that judgment?
And to Heather's point, that's what we're in the process of now, because it's such a baby industry. But Kamala, are you in here? Nobody's in here that I'm calling on. So Kamala, in the district attorney's office, she knows a lot of the groups in Georgia that are doing things, and she's been around long enough to see who's making a mess and who's doing things well. And also Heather is a great one for children, honestly, to ask, hey, have you heard of this program? Are they safe? Are they trustworthy? So.
And I mean, the other thing that I want to say is all of us as providers, we're establishing promising practices right now with what we're even doing, right? I mean, when Georgia Cares first started and we were attached to the state, they thought that we would see 10 kids in the first year, and we saw 100. So we're still learning, and I think that for Georgia Cares, I can't speak for everyone else, but for Georgia Cares, we have tried different systems, and some things haven't worked, and we've made improvements to that, and we always try to do that in the lens of trauma-informed care and what's best for our victims, right? But we want it to be quality, and so I think that I think right now, to be honest, it's evolving, and I think that every year and every month, all of our services are probably better than they were before.
And I just wanted to add, even though we said trauma-informed care is a best practice for victims of trafficking, we also do other types of therapy. It's DBT, we have CBT, we have art therapy. Most recently, the ladies at our program, we're putting them through equine therapy. So I don't want you to think that we just stick with that. We really have to work with where they're at. And sometimes they may not be ready for trauma-informed. You may do art therapy or creative expression. You know, they love to write and journal. So we used a host of different treatment modalities, and we work with them where they're at.
And so either for Ms. Robinson or Ms. Furch, is there a benefit for survivor-led or survivor-informed models?
Absolutely.
I would say absolutely. Currently, I have 2 survivors on staff, and I have seen tremendous work with the ladies that I work with because they can actually relate. As they say, I've been there and done that, and they're able to help. You know, I can say it, but I haven't been through that. But as a survivor-led organization, I can say you can really see a difference. And the ladies appreciate that. And not only that, it gives them a sense of empowerment. They see another survivor that's in front of them having, you know, a position of a program assistant or a case manager, and they're like, wow, I can get to that point where I can work with the organization and help other victims or survivors come out of this, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. So I think survivor-led is huge, is very huge. Yeah. And I think all organizations should have survivors on staff.
And just to kind of piggyback off of what Melba is saying, for Wellspring, we have survivor-led groups, which are very beneficial because it's the same kind of thing. It's empowering. It's you really, truly get my story versus, you know, a licensed person or just staff having that empathy. It's more like, I get it. I've been there. You know, with someone that has substance abuse, their sponsor is going to be someone that has lived that life. And then also it helps just with that accountability because it's almost like, I see what you're doing. Stop it. You know, I see that life. I've been there. I've done that. Let's try to do it a different way.
And so, as we've mentioned, this is a relatively new field. It's not a new form of criminal activity, but it's a relatively new field in terms of looking for services. Are there items that we can borrow from domestic violence, from intimate partner? And if so, what are they?
I think, and I can speak to Georgia Cares, but I think this is true of trafficking field in general. I think when we first started putting together promising practices, services, connectedness, coordination, all of the things that we have, we started borrowing from other fields. So we wanted to look at other fields that have had the time, that do have best practices, that have research-based curriculum and intervention methods and all of these things. So for Georgia Cares, we looked at the field of child abuse and everything that we've learned about child sexual abuse, how important prevention is and primary prevention, but also intervention methods, trauma-informed therapy, also borrowing from the field of mental health, who is no stranger to serving victims, just victims of different types of victimization, right? We also looked at the field of juvenile justice that has made, a lot of progress over the past few years, and we're following in their footsteps, I think, with things like diversion programs and community-based programming to divert kids from becoming further system involved. So I think that's how we started, is really borrowing from other fields, and because our field isn't as established as all of us would like, I think all of us on stage still look to other fields and other areas to inform our daily practices of what we're doing.
And so my next question is, as it relates to boys, we talk a lot about girls in this industry. Can someone talk about gender-specific practices for boys, or homes for boys, or places where boys can be safely placed?
So at Georgia Cares, we serve all children, so we serve young females and young males. We also serve a growing kind of emerging thing that we're looking at is transgender youth. We include those in our numbers of male and female youth. But for right now, when we talk about, for example, safe homes, because everyone wants to know about safe homes, we only have 2 safe homes, and they both serve young females. There are also a lot of different settings. So for example, right now, any of our young females who are pregnant cannot be served. So I would say boys, we need more services for them. We serve them and give them access to services just like we do any other victim. But as far as specialized services that target boys, particularly in the residential setting, that's where we are lacking. But I would also add that just as importantly, there are other subparts, I guess, of this target population, such as young pregnant females and transgender youth. Right now, if we have a transgender youth who identifies as female, we're not able to place her in one of the homes because, again, we just don't have specialized services. So I would say that there are many, many areas and room for us to grow as we learn about the emerging needs of our clients as well.
Mr. Shaw?
And we do serve men, but again, looking at it proportionately, we've had over 900 women and we've had about 8 men reach out to us for help. And so I think, one, on the self-identification piece, we have to give males more opportunity to overcome the stigmas of homosexuality. Men should be able to protect themselves or defend themselves, because most of the men, their stories track back to when they were youth as well. There just wasn't intervention when they were youth, and so that field is further behind, certainly, because there are unique needs that are different. You can't just take the model that we use for women and then just say, and we'll just do the same thing for men. So that's something that there's like one boys' home in North Carolina, and the community doesn't want it to be there. And then there's some group that's trying to start doing outreach to men in California, but there's very little work. And so that's one thing that we're really trying to push into now and say, how can we serve men better?
In terms of geographic distribution of resources, we like to think that Atlanta is rich in resources. What about people who have these issues that are in Bartow, that are in other parts of the state? What is available? Anyone?
Well, I can speak for Georgia Cares. We are a statewide organization. Yes, our offices are located in Metro Atlanta, but we serve kids throughout the state. The way that we do this is, like I said, our model is based on us going to the child. I also think that we can utilize this model because they are children, and I know that that'd be, I think, much more difficult for adults, but our kids, there's a custodian and there's a legal guardian involved, so we go to wherever they are. I would say that our numbers have been steadily increasing over the past 3 years for children outside of Atlanta, and I always say that this is not an Atlanta problem. This is a Georgia problem, this is a national problem, this is a worldwide problem. There are victims everywhere. So for us, as of yesterday, I think we have served 106 counties in the state. That's 106 out of the 159 that we have here in our state. And so, what I would draw everyone's attention to is that if there's a child in Tift County that's a victim, there's probably a child in Coffee County that's a victim, or Berrien. This is happening all over the state. It looks different in different counties. It looks different, and there are different types of trafficking. There's familial trafficking where parents sell their children. There's also the typical trafficker or pimp, as many people refer to it, style trafficking. So this is a statewide problem. Resources, I would say specifically for children, yes, we have many more resources in the Metro Atlanta region than we do in other parts of the state. But I would also say that, again, we've had more victims typically coming from Atlanta. So the more that we have in other areas, the more it's opening up opportunity to talk to service providers in other parts of the state and to talk to them about serving this part of the target population and to build their capacity. So specifically for us in the upcoming year, we are looking at Chatham County and Bibb County to try to build capacity for the southern parts and the parts of middle Georgia, where we feel like we can really start to increase the capacity of providers and services to youth in those areas.
As to adults, any services statewide?
So we bring, when we pick a woman up in Savannah, Augusta, we bring them here and we serve them here. But along with Georgia Cares, we're working to open a third home in Bibb County, which serves middle Georgia. We have a chapter down there now. So I think the vision for all of us is that as we make things scalable, that we'll take them to middle Georgia. We're going to Augusta in January, trainings in Savannah. So it is something that needs to push out, but we're kind of figuring it out here and then going.
And with Wellspring, we have a facility in Duluth, which is kind of Gwinnett County, that area over there. We partner with, of course, Outer Darkness, and then there's several other agencies that we partner with as well. But I think what we're trying to do is kind of collectively the same, is just branching out and having more partnerships with just different agencies throughout Georgia. We have partnerships outside of Georgia, but just bringing it closer to home. It's just really partnering different places and getting the name out there and knowing that, stuff like this is important, so everyone knows that we exist, we're here, this is what we provide, because I think with trafficking as a whole, it's one of those things that now people are really starting to look over and oh wow, this is really what's going on. So now we can really start talking about, yes, this is what's going on, but these are also the resources that are available.
And so let's bring it back to a court setting. You're standing, if a judge is sitting in court and there is a child or an adult in front of that judge, what is it that the judge needs from the attorney, from the advocate, to figure out what services are appropriate for that individual?
If you're in court, what does the judge need when the individual's standing in front of them?
So, I guess very initially, I guess it depends. I'm just thinking of the many different instances and all of the factors involved. But the first that I would say is what we're doing today, education and training for us about the warning signs for them to be able to spot, am I suspicious, even to begin with, of if this child may or may not be a victim. And for Georgia Cares, if there is that suspicion, all that we need is a referral to Georgia Cares. So we have a universal referral form now that can come from any referral source, and we need it signed by the legal guardian so that we can actually go out and see the child in whatever setting that they're in. And like I said, that's when we would do our research-based assessment. The great thing is if that child is a confirmed victim, they'll go through our system and process. But if they're not, we'll still share the information that we learned about that child's needs and strengths and vulnerabilities and connect them to other services for high-risk youth, for example.
So let me rephrase the question. The person is standing there, child or adult is standing there, and they have counsel, they have legal counsel, some defense attorney. What is it the judge should be asking of the defense attorney? That's a different question, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of the defense attorneys don't even know about resources out there. So if you're a judge, I would say don't assume that the defense attorney knows that many of us even exist. And we try to, like the Atlanta Public Defender's Office has us on their resource list, but that's one of however many offices are out there. So just saying, if you're here and you take your materials home and you keep those in your office or at your bench and you pull it out and say, oh, well, there were these 4, have you, counsel, go call these 4 and see if your client's a fit for any of them and come back and see me. I don't know, I don't know if that's possible, but that's how I see it. Put the ball in their court, especially for the adults, the individuals. We want, if the attorney calls me, I'm gonna say, well, you tell your client to call or put your client on the phone, because I want to hear from them that this is what they want and that they understand it. So.
No, I was going to say same thing with Jeff. I think it's important to empower, the person that's standing before you, and you can't just assume that they know the information or the judge may know the information. So I would say it's really crucial that you provide them with the information so they can, properly identify and refer.
So what is it that a judge would see with the person standing before them to say, this is someone I need to dig deeper, this is someone I need to tell probation, or I need to tell pretrial, or I need to tell someone to give me more information?
I think for me, I guess just like the therapist in me, of course, is just to ask those questions as far as trauma, because someone standing, in the courthouse that maybe has substance abuse related issues, or maybe that they were in this hotel room with this particular individual, kind of going off Jeff's story, and they're not going to tell, this is my trafficker and I'm being held hostage, but, oh, I'm here and I'll take the blame, but maybe to ask questions. So in your handout, I provided everybody with the ACE assessment, and that's something that we use at Wellspring for our adults, because most adults, women aren't going to identify with being trafficked for shame, because they are supposed to be stronger than that. They don't want to looked upon as weak. So in those questions, it's a 10-question yes or no kind of assessment tool, and it usually asks questions. The questions are based before the age of 18. What was going on in your lifestyle? And if the higher the score, so the higher the yeses, 9 times out of 10, there's some intense trauma that leads to being trafficked, or just being vulnerable for being trafficked. So I would say just digging a little bit deeper, asking those questions that are a little bit more difficult, taking that time, even if it's 5 out of the 10, and seeing what that answer is, and not just assuming, okay, drug charge, let's go ahead and get you some drug treatment, and that may not even be what they need. So just really digging deeper.
And for children, we've been working really hard over the last 1.5 years to create a screening tool that can be used for any discipline. So obviously we're talking about the courts and judges today, and we've attached that, and that's available in the materials. I see that we have 2 minutes. I'll try to wrap it up. And so with that screening tool, it includes primary indicators all the way to low indicators of trafficking. So when I said warning signs and red flags, it's a more research-based way that those things are laid out. So you can ask specific questions about behaviors, or really the tool is intended for you to use the information that you have and that you're presented with, or that a PO, for example, would have about that child, and go through those indicators. And then there are, directions for what to do. If it's on the low side, we encourage you to look at the need for services in other arenas and work with our partners at DFACS to determine if that would be appropriate or not. But if it is on the high side, then you would do a referral to Georgia Cares, and we would pick it up from there. So there's a whole tool that we provided that should be available to everyone, and we're hoping that that helps judges.
And so because you all are all here, I realize that we have 1 minute left. Because you all are here, you work collaboratively together. What is it that Georgia can do to receive challenge grants, or to receive some sort of grant so that Georgia can work on innovation in these areas?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, it goes back to, this is just for me, is collaboration. I think a lot of what we're seeing, trends in federal grants and in state grants too, they want to see collaborating. So for me at Georgia Cares, yes, we statewide serve victims, but we couldn't do this alone. I mean, we couldn't do this without any of the partners on the stage and the other, dozen partners, just off the top of my head that I can think of, but many more who serve these kids across the state. So we were meant to be the single point of entry, but we don't provide every service that kids could or do need as of right now. So for me, it's about building that strong network of collaboration, having multiple disciplines come together, because no one discipline can solve this issue and no one service can solve this issue. So I think it's about working collaboratively together, and that's, I think, what could give us the leg up on some of our other states that we might be competing for grants with.
If you all would join me in thanking our panel.